Hey guys, tonight we dive into a centuries-old mystery wrapped in parchment, ink, and just a dash of alchemical nonsense. You're standing in a quiet library. Dim light flickers on ancient oak shelves. The air smells like dust, leather, and secrets. And right in front of you lies a book so weird, so utterly baffling, that no one has ever been able to read a word of it. The Voynich manuscript. Imagine flipping through a book filled with looping letters that belong to no known language. Drawings of naked ladies bathing in green tubs. Plants that don't exist. Star charts pointing to heavens no astronomer ever mapped. You run your fingers over the parchment handmade vellum, soft and fibrous, and it hits you. This thing is over 500 years old, and still, not one single person has cracked it. Not kings, not spies, not scientists. You probably won't survive this, at least not without spiraling into a full-on conspiracy rabbit hole. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I love imagining the different corners of the world we all fall asleep in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're holding the most unreadable book in the world. The Voynich manuscript doesn't just resist translation, it mocks it. It dares you to understand it, then sits smugly while you fail. As you flip the first few pages, you're hit with the realization this script isn't just hard to read, it's impossible. Looped characters that dance between Latin, Greek, and pure fantasy. No repeats that suggest rhyme, no punctuation, just page after page of maddening elegance. The first time it appears publicly is in 1912, but its pages are at least 500 years older. A rare book dealer named Wilfred Voynich finds it hidden in a chest in an Italian Jesuit college, buried among dull theological texts. Of course, he immediately recognizes its weirdness. Who wouldn't within weeks? He's contacting historians, linguists, anyone who might help decipher the thing. And here's where you really start to feel the weight of it. Nobody does. You're walking through a parade of frustrated geniuses. William Newbold, a classics professor, spends years convinced it's written in Latin shorthand. Nope. A few military cryptanalysts after World War I think it's a complex code. Wrong again. Even Alan Turing, the Alan Turing, dabbles with it for a moment before moving on to things he can actually crack, like Nazi enigma machines. Historians still argue whether the manuscript was always meant to be understood, or whether it's just a 15th century prank taken way too far. And then there are the drawings. You lean over the pages and squint. The plants don't look quite real. Some seem based on herbs like parsley or sage, but they twist in unnatural ways, with bulging roots and curling petals that would make Mother Nature nervous. Then come the naked women. Lots of them. Dozens. Actually curvy. Unclothed figures bathing in green or blue tubs, connected by odd-looking plumbing systems. Their bodies are often surrounded by star shapes, or cradled in what looks like botanical spaghetti. If it's medicine, it's a kind of medicine nobody's ever practiced. If it's science, it's a science that has no known school. And if it's nonsense, well, it's very consistent nonsense. You turn a few more pages. Zodiac signs, Pisces, Sagittarius, Capricorn float beside yet more women, often with crowns or odd hats. You can almost hear the quill scratching across vellum, the scribe leaning close in candlelight, giggling at your confusion 500 years later. But here's a fun twist. Carbon dating proves the parchment is from the early 1400s, and the ink, it matches period composition. No modern forgery here. This isn't some Reddit hoax or TikTok prank. From 1492, it's the real deal. Listen, you find yourself staring at a page with a spiral galaxy of text. Little loops winding inward like a snail shell. It's mesmerizing. You could fall into it if you're not careful. And that's what so many have done, fallen into it. Spent years, careers, marriages, even artificial intelligence couldn't break it. In 2018, some researchers trained a neural network on multiple ancient languages and fed it the manuscript. The AI gave up faster than most humans. It could match patterns, sure, but it couldn't decode meaning. That's the thing about language. It's not just about patterns. It's about culture, context, intention, and intention is what's missing. Was this book meant to teach, to deceive, to entertain? Nobody knows. One theory suggests it was made for a rich client who couldn't read, but liked the look of esoteric knowledge. Another posits it's a woman's guide to health and astrology, essentially. A 15th century lifestyle magazine with all the weirdness of a Gwyneth Paltrow blog post, minus the jade eggs. A fringe theory you might enjoy. Some believe it was dictated by aliens to a scribe who couldn't understand them. Yes, really, that's where we're at. You're holding a book that's drawn in medieval style, possibly written in code, laced with astrology and anatomy, filled with invented plants and imaginary plumbing, and nobody has ever been able to explain it. And yet, someone will try. Not a professor, not a war hero, not a cyber genius, but a guy in Canada. Still, that's not for a few sections yet. For now, you close the book, eyes aching from the strangeness, heart pounding like you've just finished a thriller. What if it's nothing? What if it's everything? One last look at the cover-worn leather, faint embossing, no title, a mystery in your hands, and it's only just begun. You pull back the veil of time, no, really. You mentally swan dive into the swirling fog of late medieval Europe. Picture the 1400s plague still lurks in dark corners. Alchemy is trending harder than avocado toast. And if someone hands you a book with strange symbols in it, you don't call it gibberish, you call it power. So let's talk about the man who might have created this thing. You may want to hold on to your hood. He's a bit of a character. Enter the possible author, a guy named Jacobus Sinapius. Now, that's not confirmed, but historians have traced one ownership path back to him. He was the personal physician of the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, a monarch known for hoarding bizarre treasures and having the attention span of a sugared-up toddler. Think of Rudolph's court as part museum, part wizard school, part royal frat house, and smack in the middle of it, a man like Sinapius. He wasn't just a doctor, he was an alchemist, a herbalist, a collector of rare texts. In his world, medicine and magic weren't opposites, they were dance partners. You get a headache, he might check your pulse, your horoscope, and the color of your pee before scribbling down a potion involving rose hips, goat bile, and possibly mercury. And that's just for a minor fever. You imagine Sinapius hunched over a desk, candle burning low, the scent of wormwood in the air. His fingers are stained from ink and crushed herbs. He's writing something, maybe something he wants no one else to read. Maybe something he barely understands himself. Historians still argue whether the manuscript's author was a genuine knowledge seeker, a con man, or just deeply eccentric. But either way, the content fits a man of many trades and many secrets. Let's pause and breathe in the ambiance of his world. You walk through a bustling apothecary room, wooden shelves lined with dried mandrake roots, mortars filled with crushed bark, jars of cloudy fluid with handwritten labels like Essentia Lunaris or Draco's Tear. There's the scratch of quill on vellum, a faint hiss from a boiling concoction over flame. The air smells like lavender, smoke, and the metallic tang of wet ink. This isn't Hogwarts, it's real, and it's much weirder. Now, back to Rudolph II, because his part in this circus matters. You might say he was Europe's biggest collector of oddities. His Prague castle was filled with mechanical toys, preserved animals, astrology charts, and books like the one in your hands. He reportedly bought the Voynich manuscript for a sum equivalent to $100,000 today. That's a lot of coin for a book you can't even skim. So, if someone wanted to impress him or scam him, they'd make a book that looks full of secret wisdom. Mix in some astrological diagrams. Check. Draw mysterious women in tubes. Oh, yes. Invent a fake language that looks just foreign enough. Bingo. A quirky tidbit. Here Rudolph's court also housed a man who claimed he could speak with the angels. Another insisted he could turn lead into gold by singing to it. This wasn't that out there. The manuscript, if created for Rudolph, might have been the Renaissance version of clickbait. Top 10 forbidden herbs to extend your life. Number 7 will blow your mind. But there's another theory. Of course, there's always another theory. Some believe the manuscript wasn't made to deceive, but to encode real knowledge so deeply that only the right minds could uncover it. A private cipher for a guild of mystics or secret healers. That idea, well, it's romantic, isn't it? You imagine someone carrying this book across muddy roads, hidden in a satchel under a cloak, fearing the Inquisition. Maybe the knowledge inside was dangerous or sacred, something worth preserving, even at the cost of clarity. And then there's the idea that this was simply someone's life's work, a passion project, a way of trying to understand the world through symbols, stars, and dreams. You sit with that thought a moment. A single person spending years, maybe decades, crafting a universe in code, not for money, not for fame, just because. Now here's your emotionally immersive moment. You picture the author, whoever they were, growing old, their hands now trembling as they write, their eyesight failing, the manuscript half finished. Maybe there's a sense of urgency in those last pages. Maybe not. But then, nothing. No records. No final confession. Just a book passed down. Page by mysterious page. And still, the question floats like candle smoke. What kind of person writes a book no one else can read? Maybe someone who thought they'd found something too dangerous or too beautiful to say plainly. You trace your fingers over a page again. The ink isn't faded much. The pigment's green, Blue, red are surprisingly vivid. That's another weird point. Whoever made this had access to good materials, expensive ones, vellum made from calfskin, iron gall ink, real lapis lazuli crushed into pigment. This wasn't whipped up in a cottage. It took planning, funding, purpose, and intention. Again, lingers. It's hard to know whether you're standing at the edge of ancient knowledge or staring into the nonsense doodles of a medieval art kid on a sugar high. You want to believe it means something. Your brain needs it to. That's the trap, isn't it? You begin to see patterns, shapes, significance even when it's not there. But there is something there, just enough symmetry, just enough structure, enough repetition to keep you wondering, enough deviation to drive you insane. And so the mystery deepens. Was the author trying to hide knowledge from the church or from rivals? Or did they simply believe the universe spoke a language no one had yet heard? Somewhere in the distance, bells toll, the end of a long alchemical night. The manuscript is closed and wrapped in cloth, hidden in a box, forgotten for now, but not forever. It will pass hands, and one day, centuries later, a man named Voynich will find it again. You're back in 1912 now, yes? We've fast-forwarded a few hundred years, dodged a couple world wars, and landed smack in the quiet library of Villa Mondragone, a Jesuit college nestled in the Alban Hills near Rome. Think ivy-covered walls, creaking floors, and dusty trunks filled with theological texts nobody's touched in decades. And in walks Wilfred Voynich. He's not who you expect. No tweed jacket, no monocle. Instead, picture a sharp-eyed Polish-born book dealer with a flair for the dramatic and a taste for the rare. He's the kind of guy who'd wear gloves to turn a page and quote Shakespeare while haggling over illuminated manuscripts. He's here for treasure, and treasure he finds, buried in one of the old trunks, surrounded by dull tomes and forgotten volumes, is a book that stops him cold. Rough leather binding, crisp vellum pages, strange looping text that dances like musical notes written by a particularly caffeinated elf, and the drawings like nothing he's ever seen. He doesn't know it yet, but he's just picked up the most famous unreadable book in history. You crouch beside him as he flips the pages carefully, reverently, like someone flipping through a ghost story written by the ghost itself. His pulse is probably quickening, because this isn't just weird, it's important weird. Here's where your curiosity kicks in. Voynich wasn't just some flea market browser with a lucky find. He had a nose for rare texts, especially scientific ones. And this manuscript smelled like secrets. He buys it, takes it home, and immediately does what any reasonable person would do when confronted with the most confusing book in the world. He shows it to everyone. Historians, linguists, cryptographers, Latin scholars, medievalists. He even sends copies to the British Museum and the Vatican Library. Nobody knows what to make of it. One page is a botanical diagram. Another has astrological charts. Then come the bathing women again, always those women, and pages filled with blocky, circular text that never breaks, never hesitates. It flows like a chant, written without pause. And here's a mainstream historical fact. For you, the 1910s were a boom time for manuscript scholarship. It was the age of unlocking medieval knowledge, alchemy texts, secret Gnostic gospels, medical treatises from Salerno and beyond. Everyone wanted to be the next great decoder, but this book laughs in their faces. Voynich is convinced it holds secrets. He thinks it might be the lost work of Roger Bacon, a 13th century polymath whose name basically meant wizard scientist to Edwardian scholars. If Bacon wrote this, it would be like finding an unpublished Da Vinci journal in your attic. Voynich starts calling it the Roger Bacon Cipher manuscript. Hopeful branding. Let's call it. Except it's almost certainly not by Roger Bacon. Historians still argue whether the Bacon theory was just wishful thinking or a genuine misreading of the manuscript's provenance. Either way, the book remains mute. It refuses to explain itself. But here's where things get more intimate. You're in Voynich's study now, late at night. Candles flicker. The manuscript is open before him. Stacks of letters and diagrams litter the desk. He's obsessed. Can't sleep. Can't stop thinking about those pages. What do they mean? And here's the fringe tidbit. Some of Voynich's friends started to worry about his health. He wasn't just intrigued, he was unraveling. He'd mutter theories over dinner, skip meals to study. At one point, he even considered hiring a psychic to see if they could feel the meaning. That's where this manuscript takes people off the cliff. You think about how many hours he must have spent just staring, comparing letters, making charts, wondering if the plants were stylized versions of real species or entirely imaginary. One page has what looks like a daisy with squid-like roots. Another, a blue lily growing out of what might be a uterus, or maybe a flask, or both. Every answer leads to 3 more questions. Voynich eventually publishes a facsimile, hoping a reader somewhere will see what everyone else missed. Spoiler, nobody does. But the seed is planted. The manuscript gets its name, the Voynich manuscript, and slips into the collective imagination of every would-be codebreaker, occultist, and bibliophile on the planet. And while Voynich doesn't crack it himself, he becomes the book's unwitting ambassador to the modern world. There's a strange kind of loneliness in this, don't you think? You spend your life holding something ancient, beautiful, maddening something no one understands, and all you can do is pass it along, like a message in a bottle, hoping someday someone else will hear it clearly. Voynich dies in 1930, never solving the mystery, but the manuscript stays in circulation, and its legend only grows. Now, let's take a breath, because before you get to the Canadian guy with the lucky accident, you still have to pass through some of the 20th century's most brilliant minds, all of whom tried and failed to do what he stumbled into. But we'll save those for the next step on this sleepless journey. You look down at the pages once more. The writing curves like a vine, letters blooming from each other. Each symbol feels like it almost makes sense, almost. And just as you start to imagine you might understand it, it slips away. Now you're entering the codebreaker era, the golden age of men in crisp suits with overactive brains and underactive social lives. Picture war rooms full of chalkboards, radio static, and ashtrays overflowing with cigarette butts. The Voynich manuscript, long retired to the shadows of bibliophilia, suddenly becomes an obsession for people who normally spend their time cracking military secrets. Why? Because if the book had a code, and oh, it must have a code, these were the folks who could crack it. Enter William Friedman. He's not just any cryptographer. This is the William Friedman, the guy who broke Japan's notorious Purple Code during World War II. Brilliant, meticulous, with the kind of mind that probably rearranged furniture in his dreams for optimal symmetry. You'd like him until he started talking ciphers and lost you within 2 minutes. Friedman becomes captivated by the Voynich. Like so many before him, he thinks he's on the brink of understanding it. He forms a team, digs in, and begins analyzing the script with ruthless logic. One of his early observations: the script isn't random. Certain symbols appear more often. Some are more likely to follow others. That's not just decorative doodling. That's the DNA of language. Encouraged, he tries applying statistical techniques, frequency analysis, entropy testing, pattern mapping. He spends years, decades working on it. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Friedman invented the term cryptanalysis as a formal discipline. The guy literally helped define what code breaking is. And yet, even he couldn't unlock the Voynich. His eventual conclusion: the manuscript was written in what he called a constructed language, with an artificial script designed to obscure meaning. In other words, not a substitution cipher or a language like Latin, but something made up, with its own rules. A valid theory, but also deeply frustrating. Historians still argue whether Friedman was right, or whether he simply hit a wall and declared the wall impenetrable to save face. You feel that tension, don't you? The book whispers sense, just loudly enough to make you feel stupid when it slips away. It's like trying to catch fog with a butterfly net. Every time you think you have it, poof. Now let's add another character to the roster: John Tiltman. Tiltman was another wartime cryptographer, one of Britain's finest, and a guy who worked at Bletchley Park alongside Alan Turing. If this manuscript could be decoded, he should have been the man. Tiltman took a different angle. He thought it might be written in a known language, but using unusual abbreviations or encipherment methods like shorthand on a sugar rush. But no matter how he twisted and stretched it, nothing made sense. So they started asking, could it be a hoax? And here comes your fringe tidbit in 1945. A Yale professor named Lionel Strong claimed to have solved it entirely. He declared that the author was a 16th century English physician who had encoded medical knowledge using a layered cipher. He even published a partial translation that read suspiciously like his own academic wish list. Historians politely okay, not that politely laughed him out of the room. You're beginning to see the pattern. Everyone thinks they are the one to solve it. Each new theory adds a layer of weird, like a lasagna of scholarly delusion. But through it all, the manuscript stays the same. Its pages remain calm, unbothered, like an ancient cat, smug, silent, mysterious. Now picture yourself at the other end of a long conference table. Around you sit experts, linguists, botanists, cryptographers, psychologists, all taking turns describing what they think is going on. It's like the world's nerdiest seance. Someone points out that many of the plants don't resemble any known species. Another suggests that the bathing women represent some kind of pharmaceutical preparation cycle. A third just shrugs and mutters, maybe aliens. And let's not forget the De Imperio report. In the 1970s, Mary De Imperio, a researcher for the U.S. National Security Agency, compiled a massive dossier of everything known about the manuscript up to that point. She categorized symbol frequencies, graphed line structures, even tried mapping glyph positions like star constellations. Her conclusion, frustratingly vague. She didn't declare it nonsense, but didn't solve it either. Just another log on the fire. That's the emotionally immersive moment here. You feel the collective exhaustion of generations. The manuscript becomes more than a puzzle, it becomes a mirror. People project their fears, hopes, ambitions onto it. It absorbs obsession like ink into vellum. The scent of the pages, if you could smell them, would be centuries of disappointment, dried roses, and candle wax. And still, the mystery grows. In the early 2000s, computers enter the game. AI pattern recognition, semantic mapping. People begin to wonder if we just didn't have the tools until now. One algorithm even suggested the language could be a version of Hebrew with missing vowels. Another pointed to Nahuatl, an indigenous language of Mexico. Another just printed out error. You smile, because despite everything, this book keeps its secrets. A soft cliffhanger. Now the world of experts has failed. The smartest minds of 2 world wars couldn't decode it. So who does? What kind of person finally cracks open a 500-year-old mystery? Maybe someone who doesn't know any better. So here we are after centuries of monks, merchants, cryptographers, code breakers, and the occasional conspiracy theorist. You finally arrive at the most unexpected twist in the story. A retired Canadian engineer named Greg. No, not Professor Greg. Not Dr. Greg. Just Greg. Gregory Hodgins. To be exact, late 2000s. He's sitting in his modest home in rural Ontario, probably with a cup of lukewarm coffee and a cat perched nearby. You know the type, someone who once reverse engineered a dishwasher for fun and now reads medieval manuscripts because the crossword just isn't challenging enough. And here's the kicker, he doesn't even mean to get involved. You shift in your seat because this is the moment it happens. The great accident, the stumble, the banana peel of history. Greg had always been interested in puzzles. Sure, but he wasn't obsessed with the Voynich manuscript. In fact, he only stumbled across it because a friend forwarded him a link titled something like The Most Mysterious Book in the World, late one night. You know, the one's clickbait that ends with you deep in Wikipedia at 2 a.m., wondering how you got there. He starts reading, then reading more, then printing out pages of the manuscript and taping them to the wall of his office like he's in some low-budget detective show. Red string, sticky notes. You get the idea. And here's your mainstream historical fact. The Voynich manuscript had recently been digitized by Yale's Beinecke Library, making it accessible to anyone with internet access. For the first time in its long, secretive life, the book was suddenly free. That's how Greg got his hands on it. No gloves, no permission, no Latin. Now Greg, being Greg, doesn't try to decode the text right away. Instead, he just stares at it for months. He zooms in, zooms out, notes the margins, the patterns, the illustrations. One day, this is how he tells it. Anyway, he notices something small but odd in the star chart section of the manuscript. A symbol appears multiple times in a sequence that seems oddly regular. He thinks it's a ligature, a kind of 2-letter mashup used in older scripts. Then he spots another, and another. Greg starts to think, what if this isn't a cipher at all? What if it's shorthand? Now, Here's your fringe tidbit in the 17th century, especially in England and parts of continental Europe. Scholars and secretaries often used personalized shorthand systems to record notes, especially in sensitive or scientific contexts. Some were published, most weren't. These systems were often so idiosyncratic that they became unintelligible to anyone else, essentially creating private languages. Greg wonders, could this be one of those? He prints out symbols and starts matching them to known shorthand tables. One symbol looks like an old form of PL, maybe plant. Another resembles a shorthand RX, often used for medicinal recipes. Slowly, painfully, he starts creating a table. He's not decoding full sentences. Not yet, but he's finding patterns. Then comes the moment, the goosebump one. Greg notices that certain plant illustrations always show up with a recurring 3-symbol sequence. He suspects it might be a kind of identifier, maybe a Latin name, maybe a descriptor like root or flower. He compares these pages side by side, a daisy-like plant with squiggly roots, a bellflower-shaped one with an open bulb. Different images, same symbol string. That's when it hits him. These aren't unique names. They're categories. It's a glossary of herbal concepts. Not proof yet, but enough to light the fire. And remember that emotionally immersive moment we promised. Imagine Greg pacing his hallway in his socks, heart pounding, whispering, "Oh my God, oh my God," because he knows he's just pulled the thread, not unraveled the whole sweater. Sure, but it's fraying. He shares his notes online. A few scholars scoff, as scholars do, but others perk up. A team from a European university reaches out. They cross-reference Greg's tentative symbols with alchemical shorthand from a Bavarian archive. Some matches appear. Historians still argue whether this was real translation or just pareidolia seeing patterns where none exist. But something shifts. For the first time in a long time, the Voynich manuscript wobbles. It doesn't collapse, but it shakes. Greg's accidental approach, a mix of modern pattern recognition and old-fashioned desk staring, adds a new dimension to the study. He didn't solve it, not entirely, but he changed the game, and that's why you're here. You're not just watching an ancient puzzle unravel, you're watching it evolve. Here's a sensory moment for you. Imagine Greg's fingers tracing the faded ink on a printed facsimile. He doesn't touch the real thing few do, but the paper still feels heavy, soft, textured like handmade cloth. His eyes squint, nose close. The room smells like dust and printer toner. Outside, snow falls softly on the pine trees. Inside, history stirs, and the soft cliffhanger. Greg's discovery sparked renewed interest. A new generation of digital sleuths. Forums light up. Reddit threads sprawl. AI tools are launched. Language databases grow. One day, in that avalanche of new attention, someone else notices something Greg missed. But that's a story for next time. You lean in, squinting at the next page, just like Greg must have done. Only now, it's not Greg at the center of the story. It's a kid, a college student, actually 21 years old, sitting in his dorm room in Germany with ramen on the desk, a hoodie pulled over his ears, and a screen glowing far too close to his face at 3 a.m. His name Lucas Schmid, and he's about to shake things up because unlike everyone else, who's ever tried to decode the Voynich manuscript. Lucas isn't steeped in years of cryptographic lore or medieval studies. He's not bogged down by what should be true. He just knows code, and he knows data, and crucially, he knows boredom. You see, Lucas didn't set out to solve a 500-year-old mystery. He set out to avoid studying for his statistics final. Classic. Here's your mainstream historical fact by the mid-2010s. A number of universities had open-sourced the Voynich manuscript's full text, turning the strange script into a database of letter-like glyphs, essentially. A massive spreadsheet of squiggles, and with the advent of modern machine learning, students and researchers could now apply powerful algorithms to it without ever seeing the original book. Lucas wasn't trying to solve it. He was trying to break it. He'd just finished a class on unsupervised machine learning and wanted to test some code he'd written. The Voynich data was handy, weird, and best of all, unsolved. He fed it into his model, then he made himself some tea. The results were confusing. His neural network began clustering the Voynich text into distinct groups, almost like grammatical units. It was as if the machine felt structure, even when it couldn't say what the structure meant. Lucas leaned closer. Then he added metadata. He tagged each page by illustration, type herbal, astronomical, bathing women, recipes, then reran the model. Boom. Each illustration style had its own dialect. The bathing pages used a narrower range of glyphs. The astronomical charts had repeating blocks that almost looked like headers. And the herbal pages, they included glyphs that echoed across the manuscript like botanical punctuation. The manuscript wasn't gibberish. It was compartmentalized, like chapters, like someone had written different types of content in one personal handbook. That's when Lucas started a thread on a linguistics forum, posting screenshots and graphs. The post caught fire. And here's your fringe tidbit. One of the people who messaged him privately was a Thai hobby linguist who believed the manuscript mirrored the structure of Thai Kadai languages, tonal languages spoken in Southeast Asia. She showed how tonal markers might explain repeating glyphs that would otherwise seem redundant. That led Lucas to something bizarre. He ran tonal pattern simulations. The model improved. Now remember, this doesn't mean the manuscript is written in a Thai dialect. It doesn't even mean the theory is right. Historians still argue whether this was algorithmic overfitting or a glimpse at real linguistic roots. But for the first time, machine learning wasn't just guessing. It was mapping. And you know what Lucas said in an interview? He said it didn't feel like cracking a code. It felt like holding a mirror up to language itself, like watching a ghost of grammar trying to become visible. Here's your emotionally immersive moment. Picture Lucas, his screen flickering in the dark, data flowing like water. The graphs are alive colored clouds shifting in three-dimensional space. Each node, each cluster, is a whisper from the past, saying, "I am not nonsense." The room smells like instant noodles and overheating plastic. And in that moment, he forgets he's supposed to be studying for finals. He forgets he's a student at all. He's just a human being staring into a pool of ancient thought, hoping the reflection stares back. Now let's bring in another thread. The pages Lucas worked from, they're scanned. High res, sure, but flat. What if something lives in the third dimension? Enter multispectral imaging. That's where researchers fire light of different wavelengths, infrared, ultraviolet, and everything in between at the manuscript to see what's hidden beneath the surface. It's like X-raying a mummy, but for ink. One scan reveals faint tooling lines under the text guides, like a medieval version of notebook lines. Another shows erased marks, maybe trial runs or abandoned ideas. One set of lines looks suspiciously like musical notation. Yes, music. Which leads to one very dedicated theory that the entire manuscript is a sort of visual chant, an attempt to map botanical and celestial cycles through sound. No lyrics, just glyphs as symbols for tones. It sounds wild, but so did heliocentrism. And now your senses sharpen again. You hear it, don't you? The slow echo of a hypothetical melody drifting from a page of strange flowers and floating stars. The rustle of parchment as a 15th century scribe hums quietly to themselves in a cold stone room, not writing a message to us, but a memory for themselves. That's the haunting part, isn't it? Maybe the Voynich manuscript was never meant for decoding. Maybe it was a private universe, a diary, a dream journal, a spell book of one, designed not to be read by us, but to be remembered by them. And yet, we can't help trying, because somewhere in this forest of glyphs, someone left footprints, and Lucas, he just found the next one, the cliffhanger in his last batch of data. Lucas noticed one odd glyph that only appears in astronomical charts, and when he layered the pages together by symbol placement, the glyphs formed a shape, a constellation, but he hasn't figured out which one yet. You settle in deeper now, your blanket pulled up, mind buzzing with glyphs and ghost languages, because if Lucas gave the manuscript a new brain, his code, his machine learning, then what comes next gives it a heartbeat. This is where science meets something softer, stranger, something that doesn't fit neatly into algorithms or parchment or even reason. It begins in Italy, in a monastery turned archive near Frascati, a quiet place, cold stone corridors, the smell of centuries' wax, mildew, a bit of wood polish. You hear your own footsteps echoing down the hall as a woman named Elena Rossi unlocks a climate-controlled case and pulls out a tiny, overlooked letter. It isn't the Voynich manuscript, but it mentions it. You see, Elena isn't a code breaker or a data scientist. She's a historian who specializes in personal correspondence. The little scraps of daily life that never make it into textbooks, grocers' receipts, laundry lists, fragments of prayers. Her job is to catalog human messiness. One letter stops her cold. It's a note dated 1613, scribbled in the margin, the strange book of herbs, written in no tongue known to man, now in the possession of Emperor Rudolph. That's Rudolph II, remember him from way back in Section 3. Mainstream historical fact alert. Rudolph was obsessed with collecting anything unusual. He paid top coin for scientific instruments, mystical texts, alchemical manuscripts, and yes, this strange book written in a language no one could identify. But this letter isn't from an alchemist. It's from a woman, a maidservant, maybe, someone who worked in the court kitchens. She's writing home to her cousin, describing palace life. She calls the manuscript the Book of Sighs. That's right, sighs. Elena gets curious. She digs, and what she finds makes your skin prickle. A few other court documents refer to the same book not in terms of decoding it, but of listening to it. Apparently, there was a rumor in the palace if you read it aloud, the manuscript would whisper secrets back, a ghost language that responds only to its true reader. Ridiculous, right, and yet, here's your fringe tidbit. Some linguists who've tried to pronounce Voynich glyphs phonetically claim that doing so produces rhythmic, almost chant-like sequences. Not meaningful speech, but not nonsense either, like syllables, just on the edge of familiarity. One researcher even claimed the glyphs felt better when spoken aloud, as though they were designed for the mouth, not the eye. You shift a little, the room suddenly feels quieter, because here's where the story turns inward. What if the manuscript's genius isn't in its meaning, but in its effect? Back in Canada, Greg once described looking at the Voynich pages for too long and feeling calmed, like I was reading something I already knew, even though I couldn't read it at all. And this isn't just Greg being poetic. A 2020 study from a psychology lab in Denmark ran a weird little experiment. They showed test subjects random glyphs from the manuscript and from actual gibberish, measuring stress levels and focus. Subjects didn't understand the Voynich symbols, but they lingered longer. They stared more. Their pulse slowed. Historians still argue whether this effect is meaningful or just the human brain doing its usual pattern-hungry thing. But let's be honest, would you be surprised if this book wasn't just a code, but a trap for your attention? Imagine the scribe writing it by candlelight, page after page, not for readers, for themselves, for the rhythm of it, the meditation, the surrender to a world they'd built and only they understood. And here comes your emotionally immersive moment. You're in that dim, medieval scriptorium, ink-smelling air clinging to you like fog. Outside, the world is cold and loud and full of war, but inside, your pen glides over vellum. The glyphs don't have to mean something to others. They just have to be yours, your order, your escape. You sigh. Maybe that's how the book got its nickname. You never tell anyone why you made it. You just keep writing. And here's the strangest thing: modern readers still report dreams after looking at the Voynich for too long. Not nightmares, just peculiar dreams. Forests, stars, plants you've never seen but somehow recognize. Greg had them, Lucas had them, Elena has them now, too. She writes about one in her journal, a vision of a garden, with letters blooming from the soil. When she reaches to pick one, it melts into light. You can almost see it, can't you? So now we stand at a crossroads. We've analyzed it, digitized it, zoomed in, zoomed out, fed it to machines, asked it for answers, begged it to tell us who wrote it, why, and what it all means. But maybe the manuscript isn't about answers. Maybe it's about persistence. We keep trying because something about it won't let us stop. And now, your soft cliffhanger, Elena finds one more letter in the archive. This one dated decades earlier, 1589. It refers not to a book, but to a person, the lady with the book of no words. She's not listed anywhere else. Not yet. The lady with the book of no words. You let the phrase settle in your mind, like dust in an old room. The echo of it sounds like fiction, like a bedtime story wrapped in fog. But that's exactly what Elena finds. Tucked between inventory scrolls and kitchen expenses, a name erased from the usual registers, mentioned only once, then gone, and yet someone remembered her. The letter describes a woman who lived on the edge of Rudolph II's court. Not a noble, not quite a servant either. Someone who arrived with no title, no husband, no possessions except a single book she never let out of her sight. She wore gloves even indoors. They said, spoke seldom, smiled rarely, but when she opened her book in the garden and began to turn its pages, birds would quiet, people would watch from balconies, like she was playing music without a sound. You pause, because if this is real, if the lady with the book existed, then maybe we finally know who wrote the Voynich manuscript, or at least, who owned it. Now here's your mainstream historical fact. In the late 1500s, the Habsburg court, especially under Rudolph II, was a known haven for eccentrics, artists, astronomers, mystics, mathematicians. They all gathered under one roof, scribbling strange symbols and building machines no one understood. It was, quite literally, the weirdest place in Europe. So a mysterious woman with a silent book, totally on brand. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some speculative historians have linked the Voynich's illustrations, specifically the bathing women in green pools, to ancient alchemical concepts of transformation. One theory suggests the entire manuscript is a metaphor for inner transmutation, a visual, symbolic guide to personal enlightenment, hidden beneath herbal drawings and gibberish script. Which brings us back to her. The lady, Elena digs deeper. She finds nothing else, not in the official records. But one monk's diary mentions a visitor, a foreign woman, who speaks with her hands and writes in ciphers. Her eyes are like moonlight. She is not mad, only private. That word again, private. So maybe this wasn't a code book, or a hoax, or a prank. Maybe it was a language invented by one person to speak to themselves. That's your emotionally immersive moment, right there. Imagine it, the loneliness of living in a world that doesn't understand you. The frustration of real languages too clumsy, too slow, so you build your own, one that dances, one that blooms, one that only you can read, and that reads you back. You can almost feel the weight of it in your lap. Heavy parchment, warm from touch, the sound it makes as you turn the pages not dry, but soft, like turning fabric, and then one day, you vanish. Maybe the book is passed on, maybe it's stolen, maybe no one knows what they're holding, and so they store it, sell it, send it, and it begins its 500-year journey through collectors, scholars, and dreamers, including you, because now, in this moment, you're holding it too. Not in your hands, maybe, but in your thoughts, in that twitchy part of your brain that needs to solve things, in your heart, which recognizes loneliness in any language. And here's what Greg, Lucas, and Elena, and even you might come to realize. This book might never be solved. Historians still argue whether it should be. Some say it's a code, others say it's a con. Some say it's beautiful nonsense. Others think it's our greatest unsolved human artifact. But maybe it's something stranger still, a mirror, because as much as we stare at it, we can't stop seeing pieces of ourselves, our curiosity, our yearning, our hunger to belong to something secret and sacred and true. And as we reach the last page, as your fingers brush the invisible ink of imagination, you wonder, was the book waiting for us, or were we waiting for it? Soft cliffhanger. Let's give you this one last note in the corner of Elena's final document. Not part of the letter, scribbled later in red ink. She said her name wasn't important, but when the light hit her ring just right, I saw it etched there. One word, Voynich, a name not linked to Wilfred, not a surname, but a word chosen, adopted, a legacy whispered forward. And now the story begins to slow. Let your mind drift with the echo of turning pages. Let the symbols fade like fireflies, each one a flicker of someone's thought, frozen for centuries in ink. The manuscript sits on a shelf, quiet once more, but not forgotten, not now, because someone listened, someone dreamed, someone cared, and now the lights dim in your imagination. The garden of glyphs closes like a flower at dusk, petals curling inward, symbols retreating into their silent rhythms. You let out a long breath, one you didn't realize you were holding. The world of the Voynich fades, not in confusion, but in peace, because not every mystery needs solving to have meaning. Some simply ask us to sit still with them, to honor the unknowable, to marvel at the persistence of wonder across centuries. You picture that scribe, whoever they were, leaning over the parchment, crafting a private cosmos with every line. Maybe they were lonely. Maybe they were free. Maybe they were just like you, full of questions, trying to leave something behind that felt true. The manuscript isn't calling out for attention. It's inviting silence. So you settle into the quiet now. Let the stars of that ancient constellation blink out, one by one. Let your breath slow, like Lucas at his monitor, like Greg in his reading room, like Elena in her archive, all of them drawn to the same light, all of them gently changed. You don't need to understand the Voynich manuscript. You've already experienced it, and that's enough. So close your eyes. Traveler, you've wandered deep tonight, through ink and mystery, code and memory. The book is closed for now. The dream waits patiently behind your eyelids. The story is over. See you tomorrow night. Sweet dreams.